Hello, everyone. Welcome to Legal Juice, the podcast. I'm your friend, your favorite advocate, Rorisang Tsalung. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you so much. Please remember to check out our first episode and follow us on our Twitter page at juice_legal, that's our handle, to join the conversation and make your comments. Remember, this is not a consultation, it's really just a chat. So if you want more information, please do get in touch with your attorney for a more detailed chat. Now, thank you so much to our sponsor, Makers Valley Partnership, and to Kopana, our producer, for his help with all the technical stuff. Now, an old lady I know, she has a legal problem. It really is a problem that could be solved if she would just trust someone to help her. To be honest, she just doesn't trust lawyers. I mean, not at all. She says that she's heard too many horror stories of attorneys defrauding their clients, and she's just not willing to take chances. It actually breaks my heart, to be honest, because she's actually willing to live with the problem rather than trust someone to help her navigate it. It actually got me thinking, what if many other people like her need legal assistance, but they're not really reaching out for it because they've heard horror stories? What if they're hanging on to stereotypes and misinformation about lawyers that's making them skeptical even when there's no need to be? So let's talk about it. What are the real warning signs or red flags that you should note when dealing with an attorney? Which so-called red flags aren't even red flags at all? Let's chat about it. I asked friends and family to send me questions regarding possible red flags to look out for when working with an attorney. I can't possibly address all of them, but I have chosen some of the more recurring ones to discuss. So here we go. The first question I was asked is, what if my attorney works from home and doesn't have an office? Is that a red flag? The answer here is no, not necessarily. A practicing attorney must be registered with what's called the Legal Practice Council. It basically just regulates the legal profession. If they're not, run. Amongst other things, they must have a trust account to receive deposits from clients and what's called a Fidelity Fund certificate. But there's no requirement on attorneys to practice from anywhere specifically, so they really can practice from everywhere, including their own homes. In fact, all of us know how the COVID pandemic forced many businesses to restructure so that a lot of people could work from home. Attorneys are not different. Many firms now operate in such a way that only a few attorneys need to go into the office at a time, whilst others have completely given up their office space. Another perceived red flag is if an attorney works from a township or a rural area rather than the city center, a suburb, or an office park. That alone is not a red flag, and it shouldn't necessarily deter you from doing business with an attorney who happens to practice in a township or a village. Your focus when instructing an attorney should rather be the type of work that they're doing and their competence in that work. So for example, if you have a criminal law related matter, it probably would serve you better to instruct an attorney in Katlehong who focuses on that area of law rather than one in Sandton who focuses on family law. The same can be said of an attorney who practices alone. Many people have come to expect attorneys to practice in a law firm, a sort of organization, but it's really not necessary. It's quite acceptable for an attorney to practice as a sole practitioner and work all by himself. Who knows, maybe he works better that way. But again, that is not a red flag. Someone asked me, what if my attorney doesn't want to meet with me face to face? What if they only want to deal with me over the phone or via email? To be honest, I might be a little concerned there. In today's society, we can use technology to facilitate meetings remotely, and that allows us to meet without even having to leave our homes. If your attorney doesn't have an office space to consult from, keep in mind that there are many places where you can meet, and that includes a Zoom or MS Teams meeting, a rented boardroom, or even a restaurant or coffee shop. Even your own home if you're comfortable with that, although I wouldn't suggest it. Meeting someone creates familiarity, it creates trust. If your attorney is avoiding a meeting with you and only wants to deal with you over the phone or via email, I would strongly suggest that you consider looking for another attorney to work with. To me, that sounds like a red flag. What if an attorney asks for a deposit up front, before we start working together? Should I be suspicious? No, not necessarily. In fact, that's probably how it's going to go. You might pay for the initial consultation and an initial file opening admin fee. Once that's done, you and your attorney will then discuss a strategy, a sort of way to work around your problem, and then she should be able to give you a rough estimate of how much the service will cost overall. A good attorney has 2 bank accounts. In fact, it's the law. A trust account and a business account is what they should have. Once you give them the go-ahead to start working, you would then pay your deposit into the trust account. But the attorney can't really touch that money until they've actually started to do the work for you. Once they're done with their work, they'll transfer that money into their business account because now it's a fee that they've actually earned. If there's any money left over in their trust account, they should give it back to you. But of course, if the trust account is depleted before the work is done, you might have to top it up. Another person asked me, what if my attorney insists on being paid in cash? Literally, cold hard cash. Should I be worried? Absolutely. To me, this is a major red flag. Private attorneys are free to determine their own fees generally, but they'll hardly charge you on average anything less than 800 Rand per hour. Depending on the attorney's experience and what your matter requires, your legal bill could be anywhere between 10,000 Rand and 100,000 Rand easily, or even more. Can you honestly imagine walking into a building with 10,000 Rand cash to pay a bill? Can you imagine walking around anywhere with 10,000 Rand cash? Whilst there's nothing per se illegal about it, it is just suspicious. And it brings up questions about whether your attorney pays tax, whether she has a trust account, and whether or not they're even registered with the Legal Practice Council. I'd be careful around such an attorney. To be honest, I think I'd choose another one. The next question I got was, what if my attorney doesn't want to brief an advocate in my case? Should I trust him? The answer is yes. In the previous episode, I spoke about what it is that advocates do to clarify that it's not always necessary to bring us on board in a matter. Attorneys are legal practitioners. Most of them are perfectly capable of finding legal solutions to clients' problems on their own. Sometimes these problems don't even require litigation, which I explained last week just means going to court to argue cases. In which case, it certainly wouldn't be necessary to brief an advocate. At other times, the matter might end up in the magistrate's court or in the hands of an attorney who has right to appearance in the High Court, and then it might not be necessary to brief an advocate at all. Another misconception that I've often heard is the idea that the prospects of winning a case are always better with an advocate in your team. This may not necessarily be true. Again, cases differ. Each one requires a unique strategy. I'd also remind you that attorneys are perfectly capable of handling matters successfully on their own. But if your attorney does suggest briefing an advocate, don't be alarmed or suspicious if they're prone to instructing an advocate that they happen to be friends with. When you practice law for a living, you're bound to start connecting with certain colleagues in the profession more than you do with others, and you will develop a preference to work with certain characters. As a client, there's really nothing wrong with you insisting that your attorney should brief a specific advocate if there's a need to do that. But perhaps your attorney is familiar with counsel that they can vouch for. And in some instances, there may be no harm in letting them recommend working with someone that they already know. On another note, I once spoke to someone who instructed an attorney to bring a claim against the Road Accident Fund on her behalf. The RAF finally made her an offer to settle her claim for a certain amount, but she just wasn't happy with it. She actually believed that they were undersettling her claim and that her attorney was selling her out. But she just wasn't happy with it. She believed that they were undersettling her claim and that her attorney was selling her out by just going for it, instead of fighting for a bigger amount. She asked me if the attorney had any right to force her to accept the settlement, or if it was a red flag if he was trying to do that. When you bring a claim against someone, anyone, even the road accident fund, remember the matter is between you and whoever it is that you're suing. So all decisions pertaining to how the matter is handled or settled are yours to make, not your attorney's. Your attorney's job is to advise on the best possible solution, and they must explain why they think it's advisable for you to accept a settlement. But the decision has to be yours to make. When your business with an attorney is done, it's time for them to get paid for their work. Remember, most times they'll simply take money from their trust account and put it into their business account. Remember the deposit we spoke about earlier? If they didn't take a deposit, or if your trust account has depleted, now's the time for you to top it up. Your attorney will give you an invoice, letting you know how much is due. But remember, you're also entitled to receive a detailed statement that shows exactly what work your attorney did for you and how much they're charging for everything they did. It should reflect all the consulting you did, any letters they wrote for you, appearances in court, and even how much they're charging to read and draft your documents. This is important because it's the only way they can justify charging you whatever it is that they're charging. And if you feel that they're overcharging you and perhaps want to refer them to the Legal Practice Council or to dispute the amount, this document will help you to establish your case. If your attorney refuses to provide it, I would certainly consider that to be a red flag. Something I wouldn't consider to be a red flag is an attorney who advertises her services on social media. In past years, attorneys relied on billboards, the yellow pages, and even newspaper adverts to market themselves and their services. They took out TV ads and even ads on radio. It was effective, but it was also expensive. In today's society, social media allows us not only to connect with our loved ones, but also to the masses. It's free, it's easy to use, and it really draws in the crowds. Many businesses, big ones and small ones, have used it to put themselves out there successfully. Law firms are really no different. And it shouldn't concern you if your attorney's firm has a Twitter or Instagram page. Advocates are slightly different. We wouldn't typically be allowed to advertise our services by way of taking out a billboard, for example, unless we had permission from our ethics committees to do so. But to be honest, it's just not our vibe, it's not our style. It's just not the way we go about making people aware of us. So it's rare. Now, should I be worried that my attorney only practices in a particular area of law? I mean, shouldn't she know everything? The answer here is no, not really. When most practitioners start out, we take on all sorts of cases. We do this for the money, the experience, and honestly, the exposure. With time, we develop a sense of what it is that we like to do and what we'd like to practice in. It's not uncommon for attorneys and advocates to eventually decide to stick with certain areas of law that they like and are comfortable with. In this way, a practitioner may develop a practice in labor law, for instance, whilst another one develops a practice in commercial litigation or criminal law. Someone else asked me if she should trust legal aid lawyers and those who work for NGOs and law clinics that provide free legal services. My answer to this may be protracted, but in short, it's a yes. These lawyers are equally qualified to practice law like their counterparts who work in the private sector, and so there's no need for you to doubt their capabilities off the bat. In fact, as with any lawyer, my advice is that you deal with them first and make up your mind about the individual rather than letting stereotypes and stories that you might have heard to cause you to be anxious where it might not even be necessary. Remember, you're not married to your lawyer. If you're not satisfied with the service they render, whether they work for the government or happen to be a private attorney, you can always terminate their mandate and find yourself a new lawyer. I must confess, I found it funny that someone asked me if she should brief an attorney or advocate who looks broke. Shouldn't lawyers be rich? She asked me. To be honest, I think this one depends on what's most important to you. Being represented by someone who knows the law or by someone who looks the part. Unfortunately, charming looks, fancy watches, suits, and sports cars just don't win cases, except on TV, I'm afraid. Whilst practicing law can be financially rewarding, doing it for your own account is really like setting up any business. It can take time to see the real rewards, but that certainly doesn't take away from a lawyer's capability. My opinion is that you should be happy to give work to a lawyer who's coming up, so that you can contribute to the story of their success. I'm certainly not saying that flashy lawyers don't make good ones. Neither am I saying that good lawyers aren't flashy. In fact, the two ideas aren't even mutually exclusive. A lawyer can be both flashy and good, or neither. What I will say is that it's a good idea to give the lawyer you've chosen a fair chance to show you if they're the right one for you, and take it all from there. Alright, that's all the time we have for this week, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do remember to comment below and share this content with everyone you know. And please keep in touch with us via our Twitter page, with our handle being @juice_legal. Until next week, Lerato.